ask, why does it seem like when you make your voting decisions, they're based on capital rather than the working class? Billionaires and corporations got their tax issues enshrined into law forever, but the working class gets a no tax on tips or overtime that only applies to some of us, and now we wind up in a situation where we are.
With all due respect, sir, the Republican Party, now more than ever, represents the heart and soul of the working class.
That's about how it's going to be a Republican right now in America, not just in America, but in Ruby Red, Nebraska. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in the East. That was a little peek into a red district in Nebraska, Congressional District number 1, where the Republican there, Mike Flood, who you saw scrolling through his notes looking for how to answer an angry constituent, won with 60% of the vote. We showed you a little bit in the last hour, but last night at an in-person town hall, Flood's constituents took him to task over and over. It only took 2 minutes for tensions to heighten, particularly over new Republican spending bills.
I want to go right into this bill because I know this is something a lot of people have questions about. And quite frankly, from where I sit, there's been a lot of misinformation out there about the bill.
The crowd of about 750 people in attendance voiced its discontent on a variety of issues, from the ICE detentions to veterans care to the nation's debt. But health care was a huge part of their discontent.
Would you sign on or write up a bill for Medicare for all? We've got Medicare now. We can start rolling back the age 5, 10 years at a time. Would you support that?
We can't afford that.
Yes, you can.
One of those changes is that if you are able to work and you are able-bodied, you have to work. If you choose not to work, you do not get free health care. You do not get free health care. Okay. So here's a question. Do you think that people who are 28 years old that can work and refuse to work should get free health care? I don't think that a majority of Nebraskans agree with you. I truly believe this bill protects Medicaid for the future. I believe it.
The message coming from these town hall attendees, loud and clear there, heard it for yourself. These voters in Ruby Red, Nebraska are not happy with the Republican brand, the Republican Party, the Republican representative, and his practice of blindly rubber stamping all of Donald Trump's policies and practices, especially the parts that undermine American democracy. Watch this.
With $450 million FEMA dollars being reallocated to open Alligator Alcatraz and $600 million taxpayer FEMA dollars being used to now open more concentration camps, and ICE burning through $8.4 million a day to illegally detain people, how much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
Americans went to the polls in November, and they had a choice between a Democratic candidate that had an open border, no enforcement, fentanyl, drugs, human trafficking. And they had a choice between that and a candidate that said, close the border, get illegal immigrants out of our country.
It is notable that the congressman held an in-person town hall meeting at all after facing a tough one back in May and after leaders of his party advised Republicans against holding town hall meetings. But what we saw is symptomatic of a larger dynamic all across the country, that the party in power, the Republican Party, and the president who leads it, Donald Trump, are deeply, deeply unpopular in deep red parts of the country. What we saw could be a harbinger for next year's midterm elections. Here's how Flood's town hall meeting ended.
It is an honor to serve you and a privilege to serve you and the United States Congress. Thank you very much, and have a safe drive home.
It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Host of the Fast Politics podcast, Vanity Fair special correspondent, MSNBC political analyst Molly Jong-Past is here. Also joining us, MSNBC senior political analyst Matt Dowd is here. And lucky for us, the president of Media Matters for America, Angelo Carusone, is still with us. Matt Dowd, I start with you because I feel like you and I have sat at this uncomfortable corner between trying to understand public opinion that exists and, in a campaign context, trying to move public opinion around where it could be moved. It feels like Trump and the Republicans have entered a cul-de-sac, and where public opinion exists is that the voters have woken up to, not all of them, but a lot of voters have woken up to the fact that Donald Trump's DOGE cuts are bad for everyone, including veterans, that Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill kicks a whole bunch of people off of Medicaid and hurts a whole bunch of people, and that the Epstein conspiracy theory was peddled for political gain, and there's no plan to be transparent about it. You pick up those three things loud and clear from this town hall. They are known by the voters. They are known by Republican voters. And it feels like it will be very difficult for Republicans to put the toothpaste back in the tube. What do you hear from watching these town halls?
Well, I'm always a believer, that anecdotes are interesting and fun, and a town hall is an anecdote. And if by itself, I would say, oh, the town hall, there's just a bunch of people showed up and were mad. But the anecdote matters when it's combined with data. And so the town halls that we're seeing that the Republicans are having to face with all of this anger is a reflection of all of the public opinion polls. And all of the public opinion polls show Donald Trump the most unpopular president at this point in time in his history. The Republican Party is unpopular. And in fact, that they took an unpopular president with an unpopular party and then pushed an unpopular bill, a highly unpopular bill. What did they think was going to happen when they did that? And that's what the fascinating thing about this. And so the outcome of all of that is these town halls, and the Republicans that do, God bless them for holding a town hall in the midst of this. They're holding these town halls and they're seeing the reflection of where the public is on this. The other thing I think that a town hall shows, and to me, it reminds me a little of what happened in 2010, where there was a lot of town halls that showed up at Democratic districts with Democratic politicians that began to reflect, and you basically understood what was about to happen in November of that year, which was a horrible election for Democrats in 2010, and they lost the House in that election. That's what we're beginning to see. And the piece of data I think a town hall can tell you about is enthusiasm. And what I think all of the things you mentioned, ICE, the bill, everything that's happened, and now Epstein, it's all of it is a deflating mechanism for the Republican Party and an inflating mechanism for the Democratic Party in the course of this. And there we see a town hall that basically shows all of that in spades.
Matt, what do you, I agree with you about, and I think what's so precious when you hear voters in their own words confronting the people that they may have voted for. I mean, at the Grassley town hall meetings, they were calling him Chuck. I mean, he's represented some of his constituents for decades. They were confronting him about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and they seemed to not believe his stories around immigration. When you hear the voters in their own words talking about their discontent with the overreaches of ICE, when you hear them talking about the cuts to the government and services, and when you hear them talking about the Epstein scandals, do you hear a bigger, do you hear sort of like a breaking off of the coalition, or do you hear members within the coalition simply expressing discontent?
Well, it's a great question. And I think what I'm hearing is how far ahead voters are from their politicians. and how far ahead Democratic average voters are ahead of many of the Democratic elected officials in the course of this. Democratic elected officials have started figuring out, and I know we'll talk about this topic in a bit about the redistricting in Texas, are starting to catch up to where voters are. But that, to me, is what we're seeing. I mean, we've seen this before. You and I have seen this in the midst of campaigns where you can be tepid in the midst of a campaign, or a politician can be tepid, and then they figure out how far voters are ahead of them, and then they have to run and catch up to where voters are. I don't think there's any division in the Democratic Party right now, among the millions of Democratic voters. They oppose everything that Donald Trump does. They can't stand all the stuff that happened to ICE. They're upset about the Epstein stuff. They're upset about what the judiciary branch has been doing. They're upset about all of it. What the Democratic voters are also upset about is, why haven't more Democratic politicians stood in the breach and felt the same emotional way they do? And that's sort of division.
Yes.
There's not a division among voters. There's a division between voters and some Democratic politicians.